I have another devotional for you, and this one I titled KFC Bucket. And you all know what the 20-piece KFC bucket looks like. Well, the story I want to talk about today has to do with children, which that's a lot of our topics as mothers and wives and teachers and anybody who works in the church, works with kids. It's something that consumes our lives. I'm going to start with a phrase. Sometimes in raising children, you have to trust where they are is where God called them to be. I always truly believed I knew what was best for my kids most of the time. But mostly when they were younger, they needed to eat right, they needed to behave, they needed to learn in school, and I wanted the best for them. But regardless of whether I always made the right choices with them, my intentions were always good. I want to read this little line that I wrote. As our children grow, we want to teach them to understand choices that are needed, contemplate actions that are made, have a conscience concerning consequences, and learn to reason through the outcomes and produce decisions. Become the adults they so eagerly strive to become. There are so many things besides the reading, writing, arithmetic, and the Bible stories and all. It's learning to navigate through life that we want them to learn. When our kids were little, we used to go to the Tulsa Soul Winning Workshop. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's an event put on every year between two large churches up in Tulsa, and they would have 20,000 people come through. As a minister's family, we loved going. Craig and I got to catch up with a lot of other preachers and their wives and families from all over the country, kind of touch base on what things we're doing in our churches. It just was always a morale boost. But also, all the speakers we got to listen to. As my kids started getting older, they were so comfortable running around this place that I started giving them some money. Here's for your lunch. I want you to meet me back here at this time. And I would send them off to go to the classes they wanted to go to, or if they wanted some free time to go look at things that they could buy. I enjoyed watching them mature enough into areas where they could start doing and making decisions on their own. So one evening I had told them all they were to meet me back in the pavilion, which is this huge building. And at nighttime, the worship service in there together was incredible, all the singing. And there were so many people. We had all knew the section that we were going to be sitting in. And this is a huge arena. I start counting my kids as they're coming in, and they all filed in and sat down in the area with us right at the time I had told them to, except for one. Our middle child was not there. I went from being kind of frustrated that maybe he was being disobedient, just reckless, not thinking of his time. But I was patient. I was waiting. The kids were all looking down at me like, what's mom going to do? You know, he's not here. All of a sudden, I'm looking around and I'm kind of getting worried. I'm getting anxious because not only was I frustrated with him, but I start questioning myself. Maybe I shouldn't have let him go off by himself. You know, that's on me. All of a sudden, I look up way at the top of the bleachers and I see him walking around. He is wearing an usher's vest, and he's passing the KFC buckets. Every year they took up a contribution in the evening to help pay for this huge function flying in speakers and paying for the grounds. They use the whole fairgrounds there in Tulsa. And he's up there passing the buckets around. I'm thinking, how did my son get involved with that? He's a kid. You don't want to put kids in a place of responsibility over money, especially. And I'm just like, I point to him and I tell my husband, there he is. You know, I watch him do his thing. He disappears for a few more minutes, but at least now I know he's okay. He comes back and joins us. I looked down at him and I said, where, what, why? You know, I was like totally floored at where he had ended up getting. And he just said, I just followed the man and asked him if I could help. And he goes, and by the time they told me yes, it was too late to come tell you. And I figured I knew I was okay and I would come right away when we got done. And I was like, I had a hard time being upset with him. This also made me think of another situation. We had gone to a huge church a few years later when we lived in Seattle, Washington. And I think our oldest, well, I think all of our kids were still at home with us. And we're visiting with the preacher, and we're used to closing down churches. You know, we're usually the last ones to leave. I look around, and I'm thinking, I see all my kids, but one, guess what? It's my son again, and I don't know where he is. I'm looking through this fellowship hall that I'm in, and all of a sudden I see someone pushing a vacuum. And I look up at the face and I realize that's my son. Where did he find a vacuum and why is he cleaning? You know, it was not a bad thing, but it was just, I was curious. How does this child of mine keep finding himself in situations that I know nothing about and have not been involved in? We have to wait then until he completely vacuums this whole carpeted fellowship hall that's huge. And we all get out in the car, and I said, what? You know, the same kind of conversation. How did you get that vacuum? He goes, well, a lady was over there vacuuming, and I couldn't just let her do all that by herself. So I just asked her if I could do it for her. What do you say to a child who just sees where he's supposed to be and goes? Through his servant heart, he has been asked to work on staff at one of those very large churches in Tulsa. He also got to speak at that very big pavilion in that workshop. And he's also since then been asked to work for a huge company up in Tulsa. In all honesty, the church that he worked for, it was only a part-time job. The lesson that he spoke from the pavilion was only in one of the small rooms to a group of youth. And that job he landed in that huge company, he started at the very bottom. The thing is, he is a servant, and I hope he always continues to hear God's calling where he should be. There's a story about Jesus, and he wasn't where he was supposed to be. His parents might have thought the same thing. Let me read this text to you. Luke 2, starting with verse 41. Every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. When he was 12 years old, they went up to the festival according to the custom. After the festival was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but they were unaware of it. Thinking he was in their company, they traveled on for a day. Then they began looking for him among the relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. Now, before I go on to what his parents had to say, Jesus went about doing what he knew he was supposed to do. The same type of thing I saw in my son when my son was wanting to go off and do his thing. The way his parents saw it, I thought, resembled so much what I felt. I was astonished and thrilled to see my son in a position that I never would have imagined him being in. But at the same time, I was very worried and concerned. So here's what his parents said. Verse 48. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. That means greatly surprised, amazed. His mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you." They were very concerned, looking everywhere. And I bet a lot of their concern was, how could we travel a whole day and not bother finding where he was at? We thought he was responsible enough. And you put it on yourselves at the same time. It goes on to say, "Why were you searching for me?" Jesus answers. "Didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house? But they did not understand what he was saying to them." I pray my son never quits being about his Father's business and being in his Father's house doing what he needs to do. Sometimes in raising our children, you have to trust where they are is where God has called them to be. I hope you all have a blessed day, and even in these troubled times, most of you know where your children are. They're at home. Maybe they're right on top of you trying to work from home, or maybe you've had to leave them at home. But we can trust, if we are raising them to love God and to be about his business, we can trust that where they are may be just where God has called them to be to do his best work. You all have a great day. Thank you.